Yes, it's me again. Hello. This kilt, this video is aimed directly at the chap whose kilt this shall shortly be. I'm making him a kilt from Seaforth number 2. He's a friend of the regiment rather than a member of the regiment. And I wanted to tell him a little bit about the history of the cloth. Because once when I was still curator of the Regimental Museum, I had somebody getting my grill about us not acknowledging the fact that we were using Mackenzie tartan. And I quite accurately replied, well, actually, you've got it absolutely wrong. You're wearing Seaforth tartan because this was deliberately created by the regiment, specifically the 78th Highlanders, later 2nd Battalion Seaforths, and the battalion from which the Seaforths of Canada draw the majority of their customs and their dress. And what had happened was, in 1793-ish, the custom of the day was that the regiment would be authorized to draw or privately purchase from funds supplied by the Crown sufficient cloth for the soldiers to make up their kilts. And they were 3.5 yards, 4 yards, and they were of the universal tartan, the so-called government tartan, now known as the Black Watch. It was the government tartan because at the time this was the only one that the government was prepared to allow to pay for. But there is this, or at least there was this sort of phenomenon amongst infantry soldiers, certainly as true as late as my day, that we want to look the same, but we also want to look better than those munters in B Company or those people in the other battalion. So they started to difference their tartan. They would take a ball of yarn and a darning needle and weave in extra colors, extra stripes. So the 78th started with this, and then in, I'm going to say 1793, plus or minus a couple of years, they deliberately added a buff stripe to match the lining on their coats. The buff, their regimental nickname was the Rossshire Buffs. So they added a buff stripe, which was later changed to white, which we see there. Jokes on them, or jokes on all of us though, because with time and use, that white line generally starts to become a little bit buff. So they added the buff line to match the lining to match their facings on their coats, and then later they added a red line to match the coat themselves. And that's a mouthful that didn't used to be there. That's a matter of concern. Okay, so I'm going to put that away. So, having done so, because the Black Watch, where it was the 1st Highland Regiment, their tartan is number 1, Seaforth number 2. And then after a while, because when the two regiments, I believe the 71st Foot, I'd have to look, the two regiments that later became the Highland Light Infantry, because they were both had a Mackenzie connection as well, they adopted a Mackenzie Seaforth tartan as well. But again, to difference it from the 78th, they wove it in a larger set. And I don't have a very large piece here. I had more, but I can't remember where I put it. I think I might have used it all up. But you can see there the difference in the size of set for HLI cloth, Highland Light Infantry number 2A. So problem was with the when I was working for the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada for many years, we were working with some seriously old kilts because, I'm going to speak frankly, the repair and replacement policy wasn't all that I would wish. So I'd be working with 50, 60, 70-year-old kilts. And of course, immediately I noticed that the civilian Mackenzie, as we see here, doesn't look at all like Seaforth number 2. So problems in supply, because I could still buy what was represented to me as the military heavyweight, the 22 ounce. But this stuff, this modern stuff, not naming the mill, but this modern stuff isn't the same as the material that was provided in the past. for reasons. Won't pick that apart. But I didn't consider it a good investment to buy this stuff. It wasn't as durable. It didn't hold a press nearly as well. So what I started doing was, we can't make a kilt out of that for the Seaforths, because you'll be able to tell from across the room that, you know, looking at the difference, you can see the difference, extremely marked. So what I did was, I sat down, and this took me a couple of years actually. I would sit down with a piece of the cloth, actually with an old kilt. I'm not going to haul out one of the old kilts I'm working on right now, some of which are 70 years old. But I sat down with a needle and a magnifying glass, or let's admit it, I used the old man's zoom, and I counted the yarns. And I started with the white line. There's 10 white, 4 black, 40 green, 40 black, and so on. So I placed an order with Dalgleish saying, I want Mackenzie, but here's my corrected thread count. And they produced a bit. And it took 2 or 3 tries before I reached the point where, now I don't have a Seaforth, this is HLI. I don't have a piece of original cloth to show you to compare it to, but I got it to within what I considered acceptable allowance of, I think, plus or minus a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch. And then a problem developed a few years later, because for whatever reason, I don't understand the technology, they weren't able to produce, they can only produce tartans of a certain sett size. And the size of this set is, okay, this is 10 3/8. Okay, it's actually looking that direction, it's a 9.5. But they told me that there's certain sets that if they're so large, the single width loom can't do it. And it's the single width cloth that I'm most interested in, because it has the proper selvage. So what to do? So I went back through my scraps and my artifact scraps of tartan, and I found a piece of cloth, a Seaforth cloth, that has provenance to 1910, the raising of the regiment. In fact, therefore, it would have been loomed and sewn 1908 or 1909. And the set was just that little bit smaller than what we've been wearing, but not so noticeably so that it would cause comment. And I sent them that, and they said, that's fine, we can weave that on the single width. So that one I registered as Seaforth 1910 to differentiate it between Seaforth Highlanders. And then later on, in the build-up to the regiment centennial in 2010, I took an old kilt which had provenance to the Great War, and I color matched the fading that it had, because I knew the fellow who had worn it all through the Great War. He'd had it since 1914. He wore it until he got out in 1919. Wore it throughout the Great War, and it had faded quite wonderfully. So I color matched that Great War kilt and produced this, which I registered as Seaforth Centennial, to show, again, to mark the 100th anniversary of the raising of the regiment. So I did that. So yeah, so what I'm going to do now is I've just examined the cloth end to end. I've gone over the cloth. I've examined both sides of the cloth, because one will be marked the good, one edge will be marked the better, and you can generally tell by looking at it. But the set cloth is so good that I had to really look at it. You may be able to see there that this edge, I should say, is just a little bit tidier than this one. So this is the bottom edge of my kilt. So I've gone over the cloth end to end on both sides, looking for anomalies and imperfections. And sometimes those imperfections will be quite slight. More often than not, there'll be a knot, which you can feel rather than see. And that knot represents where either the yarn broke or the bobbin was winding down, and the webster, that is to say the weaver, stopped the loom, tied in a new bobbin, and got it going again. And it's one of the hallmarks of quality cloth. So as you can see from my chalk marks, I've also measured it. I've got a notch cut here on my workbench. That's exactly a yard. So I mark it out to see exactly how much cloth I've got. And this is a bit over 8 yards. In fact, there's my 8-yard mark. This one is 8 yards plus 2 feet, 25 inches. I don't believe I'm going to incorporate that extra length in this kilt because it serves nothing really. As it is, it's still half a yard more cloth than the Army issue kilts, which were 7.5 yards for whatever reason, I don't know. The extra half yard in this means that it gets to have a better and deeper apron pleat, which is again hallmark of my work, because I think it results that the kilt hangs better. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to shut off the camera now and put away my samples of cloth where I can find them next time, and then carry on. Thank you.